$1,500 a month. 5 long, relentless years working abroad. Sarah sacrificed her entire youth, scrimping and saving every penny to send home, driven by a single hope, that her parents could live out their golden years in comfort. But the day she finally returned, she wasn't welcomed by the warm embrace of family. Instead, she was met with a shock that shattered her heart. Her childhood home had been seized by her own brother, and her frail parents had vanished without a trace. And when Sarah finally found them, the image of 2 elderly figures, shivering as they dug through trash bags in a dark, freezing alley, would haunt her for the rest of her life. What happened? What did her beloved brother do to the very people who gave him life? And could Sarah's late return be enough to salvage this tragedy? Get your tissues ready, because the story you are about to hear will bring you to tears. Welcome to Emotional Stories. Before we begin, don't forget to like and leave us a comment telling us what state or country you are joining us from. We would love to know where you are watching us. Do you follow us from California, Texas, New York, Florida, the United Kingdom? Write it in the comments and share this story with someone who needs to remember the value of family. The light of the sunset filtered through the gray clouds as the plane touched down at Detroit Metropolitan Airport. Sarah pressed her face against the window, watching the lights of the city where she was born flicker in the distance. For 5 long years, Sarah had worked double shifts in Toronto. Because of strict immigration paperwork issues, she hadn't been able to cross the border to visit even once. She sacrificed everything, missing birthdays and holidays, just to send every penny home, to ensure that her parents, Mr. Robert and Mrs. Margaret, could live with dignity in their old age. While waiting in the immigration line, Sarah couldn't stop smiling. In her carry-on bag, she carried a blue velvet case with a pearl necklace for her mother, something Mrs. Margaret had admired in magazines for years but could never afford. For her father, she had bought an antique pocket watch, one of those he used to repair when he was young and worked at the watch repair shop downtown. They were modest gifts for some, but for Sarah, they represented years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of skipped meals to save a little more. The officer stamped her passport with a sharp thud. "Welcome home," he said with a routine smile. Sarah nodded, feeling tears begin to form in her eyes. Home. That word that had echoed in her mind during 5 years of Canadian winters, 5 years of missing the smell of her mother's freshly baked biscuits and her father's endless stories about his youth. She collected her suitcases and left the airport. The crisp, familiar air of the city hit her like a hug. Everything seemed familiar and strange at the same time. Street vendors shouted their offers. The smell of hot dogs and roasted nuts filled the air. The noise of traffic created a chaotic symphony that was music to her ears. After years of orderly Canadian silence, she took a cab and gave the address of the family home, that 2-story house in the Oakwood neighborhood where she had grown up, where she had learned to walk, where her mother had taught her to cook meatloaf, and her father had told her ghost stories that kept her awake at night. During the entire ride, Sarah kept looking out the window, recognizing streets, corners, the park where she played as a child, the church where she was baptized, the bakery where her father bought donuts on Sundays. The driver watched her in the rearview mirror with curiosity. "Visiting, miss?" he asked kindly. "I'm coming home," Sarah replied with a smile that lit up her entire face. "I've been away for 5 years. I haven't seen my parents in all that time. Only video calls and photos, but it's not the same." "Ah, how nice," said the driver with genuine joy. "Your parents must be very excited. Surely they are preparing a big dinner to welcome you." Sarah nodded, imagining the scene. Her mother would probably be in the kitchen since early morning, preparing all her favorite dishes. The pot roast that took hours to make, the mashed potatoes with that special gravy only she knew how to make, the green bean casserole, the pumpkin pie. Her father would be checking the house over and over, making sure everything was perfect, cleaning the windows even if they were already clean, fixing little things that didn't need fixing, nervous and excited like a kid waiting for his birthday. But what Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine as the cab advanced through the familiar streets of Michigan, was that the reality she was about to face would be completely different from the perfect image she had built in her mind during 5 years of absence. The cab stopped in front of a house that Sarah recognized and didn't recognize at the same time. It was the right address, yes, but something was different. The lawn her father cared for with such dedication was neglected, full of weeds. The white wooden fence he painted every year was peeling and gray. The windows, which her mother always kept spotless, were dirty, some with the blinds closed unevenly. The oak tree they had planted when she was born was still there, but its branches hung heavy and unpruned. Sarah paid the driver with a generous tip and took down her suitcases. She stood in front of the house for a long moment, feeling a strange sensation settle in her stomach. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones, that intuition she had developed as a nurse, that ability to perceive when something was wrong even before seeing the obvious symptoms. She walked up the porch steps, noticing how some were cracked and loose. The front door had new scratches, as if someone had tried to force it. The doorbell, which used to light up blue when you pressed it, was broken. Sarah knocked on the door with her knuckles, softly at first, then harder. Several minutes passed. She knocked again, this time calling out, "Mom, Dad, it's me, Sarah, I'm back." Finally, she heard slow steps approaching. The door opened only a crack, held by a security chain that wasn't there before. Through the narrow space, Sarah saw the face of her brother Jason. But it wasn't the Jason she remembered, that cheerful and joking young man who had always defended her. This Jason had deep circles under his eyes, messy hair, a beard of several days without shaving. His eyes, once bright and full of life, now looked dull and evasive. "Jason," said Sarah, her voice full of mixed confusion and joy. "Brother, it's me. Open the door." Jason didn't move. He stood there looking at her through the crack, as if she were an unwelcome stranger. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice flat, without emotion. "I didn't know you were coming. I sent you a text a week ago," replied Sarah, feeling the joy beginning to drain from her body, replaced by growing anxiety. "I told you the date and time of my arrival. Didn't you get it?" "Oh," was all Jason said, offering no further explanation. "Are you going to let me in, or are we going to talk through this crack?" asked Sarah, trying to keep a light tone, although her heart was starting to beat faster. Jason hesitated. For a moment, Sarah thought he was going to slam the door in her face, but finally, with slow and reluctant movements, he removed the chain and opened the door just enough for her to enter. Sarah entered, dragging her suitcases. The interior of the house hit her like a punch to the stomach. Everything had changed. The furniture she remembered, the pieces her parents had bought with so much effort over the years, had disappeared. The floral sofa, where her mother sat to knit while watching her soap operas, was gone. In its place was a black leather sofa, modern but cold, looking out of place in the family home. The walls, once covered in family photographs, decades of smiling memories, were bare, painted a dark gray that made everything feel like a cave. The fireplace mantel, where her father proudly displayed his bowling trophies from the senior league, was empty, except for a flat-screen TV that Sarah knew her parents would never have bought. They barely knew how to use the remote of the old TV. The hardwood floor her father polished every month until it shined was covered with cheap rugs. The air smelled different of stale beer, and something Sarah couldn't identify. But that turned her stomach. "What happened here?" asked Sarah, turning slowly in circles, trying to find something, anything that reminded her of the home she had left. "Where is everything? Where are Mom and Dad's things?" Jason closed the door and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his chest. He was wearing a stained t-shirt and pajama pants, even though it was mid-afternoon. His feet were bare and dirty. "Things change," Jason said with a tone that intended to sound casual but came out defensive. "We needed to update the place." "Update?" repeated Sarah, her voice rising in pitch. "Jason, this was our parents' house. Every piece of furniture, every photograph had a story, a meaning. Where is everything?" "We sold it," said Jason brusquely. "We needed the money." Sarah felt as if the floor moved under her feet. "You sold our parents' things without consulting them? Without consulting me?" "I didn't have to consult you," snapped Jason, his voice hardening. "You were living your dream life in Canada, earning in dollars while I stayed here dealing with everything." "I was working to send you money," shouted Sarah, tears beginning to well up, "so that Mom and Dad could live comfortably, so they wouldn't lack anything." "Where are they? Where are our parents, Jason?" It was then that a woman appeared from the kitchen. She was young, probably Jason's age, with bleached blonde hair and long nails painted bright red. She wore a tight dress and too much makeup to be at home on a Tuesday afternoon. She chewed gum loudly while looking at Sarah with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "So this is the famous sister," said the woman with a nasal voice. "The international nurse. Jason won't stop talking about you." Sarah looked at her brother with wide eyes. "Who is she?" "I'm Tiffany," the woman responded before Jason could speak, approaching with confident steps and extending a hand with perfectly manicured nails. "Jason's girlfriend. I live here now." Sarah ignored the outstretched hand. "You live here?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "In our parents' house?" "Technically, it's my house now," said Tiffany with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jason and I moved here about 6 months ago. It's much more spacious than my previous apartment." 6 months. Sarah felt like she was in a nightmare. "Jason, what is going on? Where are Mom and Dad?" Her brother couldn't look her in the eyes. He fixed his gaze on the floor, on the walls, anywhere except his sister's face. "They left," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "What do you mean they left? Where? Up north? With the aunt and uncle? With Uncle Frank and Aunt Barbara? They said they wanted to be in the country, away from the city. You know how Dad is, always talking about how much he missed the town where he grew up." Sarah knew her father better than anyone. Mr. Robert had spent 50 years in this city. He had built a life here, a community. All his friends from the bowling league, the church group, the store where he bought his newspapers every morning were here. The idea that he would simply decide to go to the country, leaving everything behind, made no sense. "I don't believe you," said Sarah firmly. "Dad would never do that. And Mom even less. She has her sewing group, her lifelong friends. Why would they leave like that without telling me anything?" "Because they didn't want to worry you," intervened Tiffany with a voice that pretended to be understanding, but sounded rehearsed. "Jason told me your parents have always been like that. Very proud. They didn't want you to leave your important job to come take care of them. They preferred to go with family who could be more attentive to them." "Shut up," Sarah snapped at her with a ferocity that made Tiffany take a step back. "You don't know my parents. You know nothing about them." She turned to her brother, approaching until she was inches from his face. "Jason, look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. Where are our parents?" Jason finally looked at her, and what Sarah saw in his eyes terrified her. It wasn't just evasion or guilt. It was something deeper, darker. It was fear, mixed with shame, a combination that made her stomach twist. "I already told you," murmured Jason, his voice cracking. "They went up north." "It's better you leave them alone, Sarah. It's what they wanted." "Give me Uncle Frank's phone number," demanded Sarah. "I'm going to call them right now." "I don't have his number," said Jason too quickly. "He changed phones a few months ago." "Lie," shouted Sarah. "You're lying. I can see it in your face, Jason. You've always been a terrible liar. What did you do? What did you do to our parents?" "I didn't do anything to them," shouted Jason back, his voice full of defensive fury. "They decided to leave. I just needed space. We needed space. Tiffany and I wanted to start a life together, and they were here, always here, getting into everything, criticizing everything we did." "This is their house," roared Sarah, feeling rage beginning to replace shock. "They raised you here. They gave you everything. And this is how you repay them, by kicking them out of their own home." "Look, Sarah," intervened Tiffany, her tone now annoyed. "I don't know what perfect image you have in your head of this family, but the reality is different. Your parents are old. They needed more care than Jason could give them while he worked. It was better for everyone that they went with family who had more time." "Better for everyone or better for you?" spat Sarah. "So you could have this house to yourselves? So you could sell my parents' things and keep the money?" "I sent them money every month," shouted Sarah, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. $1,500 every month for 5 years. "Where is that money, Jason? What did you do with it?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Jason and Tiffany exchanged a look, and in that moment Sarah knew. She knew with absolute certainty that made her feel physically sick. "We used it to improve the house," said Tiffany finally, her voice now defensive. "To pay debts. To live. Life is expensive, Sarah. You can't expect all that money to just sit there saved." "That money was for my parents," said Sarah with a trembling voice, each word weighing like lead. "Every penny I earned, cleaning vomit, changing diapers, working double night shifts, was to make sure they could live with dignity. And you," she couldn't finish the sentence. She covered her mouth with her hand, feeling nauseous. "Sarah, you have to understand," began Jason, but she raised her hand to stop him. "No," she said with a voice that had found a dangerous calm. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I want the exact address of where our parents are. Now." "I don't have it," insisted Jason. "I swear, Sarah, they just said they were going up north with the aunt and uncle. They didn't leave me a specific address. Then I'm going to call every contact I have until I find them," said Sarah, taking out her cell phone. "And when I find them, when I hear their version of this story, you're going to wish you had told me the truth." "Do whatever you want," said Tiffany with disdain, taking Jason by the arm, "but don't come later making us feel bad. We did the best we could with a difficult situation." Sarah looked at both of them with such contempt that Tiffany recoiled. "Get out of my sight," she said with a low and controlled voice, "before I do something I regret." Jason and Tiffany retreated to one of the bedrooms, closing the door behind them. Sarah stood alone in the living room she no longer recognized, surrounded by the suitcases she had brought full of love and gifts, feeling her perfect world crumbling around her. With trembling hands, Sarah dialed Uncle Frank's number. The phone rang and rang until voicemail picked up. She tried again. Same result. She called Aunt Barbara, the number she had marked as disconnected. She tried other uncles, cousins, family, friends. No one answered, or the numbers were out of service. Finally, she called Mrs. Dorothy, her parents' lifelong neighbor, an older lady who had been like a grandmother to her when she was a child. The phone rang 3 times before a warm and familiar voice answered. "Hello, Mrs. Dorothy. It's Sarah, Mr. Robert and Mrs. Margaret's daughter. Sarah, my child." "Mrs. Dorothy's voice filled with emotion and surprise. "How are you? Did you come back from Canada?" "Yes, Mrs. Dorothy. I just arrived today. I'm at the house, and I need to talk to you. Can you see us?" There was a pause. When Mrs. Dorothy spoke again, her voice had changed, charged with something Sarah couldn't identify immediately. "Yes, my child. Come to my house. There are things you need to know." Sarah grabbed her purse and the handles of her suitcases. She wasn't about to leave her parents' gifts with them. She didn't bother telling Jason she was leaving. She dragged her luggage out, closing the door behind her with more force than necessary, and walked the 3 houses that separated her from Mrs. Dorothy's house. Mrs. Dorothy was waiting for her at the door. She was a small woman in her 70s with completely white hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes, though surrounded by wrinkles, were bright and astute. When she saw Sarah, she opened her arms, and the young nurse collapsed into them, sobbing like she hadn't cried in years. There, my child," murmured Mrs. Dorothy, stroking her hair like she used to do when Sarah was little and fell off her bicycle. Come in. We have a lot to talk about." Mrs. Dorothy's house was exactly as Sarah remembered it. Small, but immaculately clean, full of potted plants, with family photographs covering every available surface. It smelled of vanilla and fresh coffee. It was so different from the house she had just left that Sarah felt she could finally breathe. They sat in the kitchen where Mrs. Dorothy poured her a cup of hot tea. "For the nerves," explained the old woman with a sad smile. "You're going to need it." Sarah took the cup with both hands, grateful for the heat emanating from it, and looked directly into Mrs. Dorothy's eyes. "Please, tell me the truth. Where are my parents? And don't tell me they went up north, because I know that's a lie." Mrs. Dorothy sighed deeply, her shoulders dropping with the weight of what she was about to reveal. "You're right, my child. That's a lie. Your parents didn't go up north. In fact, they didn't go anywhere. Well, not voluntarily." Sarah's heart began to beat so fast she could hear it in her ears. "What do you mean?" "About 8 months ago," began Mrs. Dorothy slowly, choosing every word with care, "your brother Jason met that woman, Tiffany. At first it seemed just like another relationship. You know how young people are. But she is not a good person. Sarah, from the first day I saw her, I knew. That woman had snake eyes, always looking at things in your house, calculating." Sarah squeezed the cup so hard her knuckles turned white. "Jason changed when he met Tiffany," continued Mrs. Dorothy. "He stopped visiting his friends. He quit his job at the hardware store, that job he had for years. Tiffany put ideas in his head. She told him he deserved more, that he could have more if he just got rid of certain burdens. My parents, whispered Sarah. Your parents? Confirmed Mrs. Dorothy with sadness. At first it was subtle. Jason started complaining about how much it cost to maintain the house, how much your parents ate, the cost of your father's medicine for his diabetes. Tiffany complained about the noise your mother made when she cooked early, about the smell of your father's medicines. They started treating them worse and worse. Why didn't they tell me anything? Asked Sarah with a cracked voice. Why didn't my parents call me? They tried. My child, your mother came to my house several times crying. She told me she wanted to call you, but that Jason had taken her phone saying she had to save on the bill. Poverty is hard, Sarah, but it's the control that breaks you. It wears down your spirit, day by day. Every time I wanted to scream for help, fear choked me. I was terrified you'd drop everything and ruin your career, terrified the neighbors would judge your brother. I was so foolish. Silence often protects the abuser more than the victim, a painful lesson Mrs. Dorothy had to learn the hard way. She is finally peeling back the layers of this nightmare, but Sarah still has to face the hardest part, finding them before the cold city takes its toll. I thought if I just endured a little more quietly, the son I raised would come back to me. But my silence didn't save him. It only fed his greed. He bought her one of those basic phones that only worked for emergency calls, but Jason controlled even that. Sarah's tears were falling now without control. Go on, please. I need to know everything. About 6 months ago, Jason told your parents that Tiffany was moving into the house. Your parents weren't happy, of course, but he's their son, and the house is technically in Jason's name since your father transferred it years ago to avoid future legal problems. Remember? You know, Sarah, the day your father put pen to paper, his hand was trembling not with age, but with pride. He thought he was securing his son's future. We never imagined that we weren't handing him a gift, but the very key he'd use to lock us out of our own lives. Sometimes, a parent's trust is the sharpest blade of all, and we ended up turning it on ourselves. Sarah nodded. Her father had done that when she was 20, a decision that at that moment seemed practical and now revealed itself as a terrible mistake. When Tiffany moved in, things got worse quickly. She and Jason started selling things from the house. First it was the antique furniture saying they needed space, then the photographs, the memories, everything. Your mom cried every time she saw something else disappear. Oh my God, sobbed Sarah. They started restricting which rooms your parents could use. They told them the living room was just for them, that the kitchen could only be used at certain times. They put a padlock on the new refrigerator they bought, saying your parents ate too much. What? Sarah felt she was going to vomit. Your father tried to defend himself. He tried to remind Jason that this was his house, that they had raised him. But Jason, or rather Tiffany, told him that if they didn't like it they could leave, that they were already old and a burden. No, moaned Sarah. No, no, no. One night, about 4 months ago, there was a terrible fight. I heard them from my house. Tiffany was screaming that she was sick of living with 2 stinky old people. Jason didn't defend her. Sarah, your brother, that sweet boy I saw grow up, didn't defend his own parents. Mrs. Dorothy paused, took a sip of her own tea, and continued with a softer voice. The next morning, I saw your parents leaving the house with 2 small suitcases. Your mom was crying. Your dad was trying to be strong, but I could see his hands shaking. I went up to them, asked them what was happening. What did they say? Asked Sarah, although part of her didn't want to know the answer. Your father told me they had decided to go away for a while, give Jason and his girlfriend space. He gave me a phone number. He asked me that if you called looking for them, to tell you they were fine. But Sarah, Mrs. Dorothy took the young woman's hands in hers, which were cold and trembling. I knew something was wrong, very wrong. Why didn't you call me? Asked Sarah, not with anger, but with desperation. I tried, my child. I called the number I had, but it always went straight to voicemail. I sent messages that were never answered. I thought maybe Jason had given me the wrong number or that you had changed your number. My number is the same as always, said Sarah with a hollow voice. Jason must have blocked his number. After your parents left, I tried to track them down. I asked around the neighborhood, but no one knew anything. I went to the church where your mom always went to her prayer group. The ladies told me that Mrs. Margaret had stopped attending months ago, since before leaving the house. And the house? Did you see Jason and Tiffany afterwards? I saw them, replied Mrs. Dorothy with disgust in her voice, living like kings in that house, buying new TVs, expensive furniture. I saw Tiffany showing off new jewelry, all paid for with the money you sent for your parents. I'm sure of it. Sarah stood up abruptly, almost knocking over the teacup. I have to find them. I have to find my parents. There is something else you should know, said Mrs. Dorothy quickly, also standing up. About 2 weeks ago I saw your mom. Sarah's heart stopped. What? Where? It was by chance. I was downtown shopping at the market. It was getting dark and I decided to take a shortcut through the alley behind the Greyhound station, that one where the restaurants throw out their trash. And Sarah could barely breathe. I saw an older couple digging through the dumpsters. At first I didn't pay much attention. Sadly, there are many people in that situation in this city. But something made me look closer. The way the woman moved, something in her posture. Mrs. Dorothy wiped the tears that began to fall. It was your mom, Sarah. It was Mrs. Margaret. No, moaned Sarah, feeling like a dagger pierced her heart. It can't be. I ran over. I called her by name. When she turned around and saw me, the shame in her eyes. Mrs. Dorothy had to stop, overwhelmed by emotion. She almost ran, Sarah. Your mom almost ran to hide from me. Hunger. It has a cruel way of stripping away your dignity faster than the cold ever could. When my hand reached into that freezing trash bag, the thing that crumbled wasn't the stale bread, it was the last shred of my pride. I wasn't afraid of dying, Sarah. I was terrified that someone would see me, that they'd see Mrs. Margaret, the woman who used to teach the neighborhood children, reduced to nothing but a ghost haunting the alleyways. What did she say to you? What happened to her? I stopped her. I hugged her. She cried and cried. She told me she didn't want anyone to see them like that she was so ashamed. Your dad was with her digging in the trash. They looked. Mrs. Dorothy closed her eyes as if the image was too painful to bear. They looked like skeletons, Sarah. Thin, dirty, in clothes that were too big for them. Your father, that proud man I knew, couldn't even look me in the eyes. Sarah collapsed onto the floor of Mrs. Dorothy's kitchen, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. The old woman knelt beside her as best she could, wrapping her arms around her, crying too. I gave them all the money I had on me, continued Mrs. Dorothy through tears. About $20. I begged them to come to my house, to stay with me, but your mom said no, that she couldn't be a burden to anyone else, that they had already caused enough problems. They were never a burden, sobbed Sarah. Never. They gave me everything. Everything I am. I love them more than anything in this world. I know, my child. I know. I told your mom I would call you, that you deserved to know where they were. But she grabbed my hands so tight and begged me not to. She told me you were building a life there in Canada, that you had opportunities, that they didn't want to ruin it for you with their problems. Their problems are my problems, shouted Sarah. They are my parents. Their pain is my pain. I tried to follow them when they left, but they disappeared into the streets. Since then, I've gone back to that alley several times, at different hours, hoping to see them again, but I haven't found them. Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a fierce determination taking over her. I'm going to find them. I'm going to scour every street, every alley in this city until I find them. I'll help you, said Mrs. Dorothy. I'll immediately call the other ladies in the neighborhood. We'll organize a search. No, said Sarah, standing up. Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy. But this is something I have to do myself. I need to see them. I need to hug them. I need to ask their forgiveness for not being here. You have nothing to apologize for, my child. Yes, I do, replied Sarah with a firm voice. I left. I left them here with Jason, trusting that he would take care of them. I should have come to visit them more often. I should have insisted on talking to them more frequently. I should have known something was wrong. You can't blame yourself for your brother's actions. Maybe not. But I can blame myself for not being alert, for not listening to my instinct when the video calls became less frequent, when their messages became shorter and vague. Sarah took her purse. Thank you for telling me the truth, Mrs. Dorothy. Please, if you see them again, call me immediately. She wrote her number on a piece of paper. I will, my child. And Sarah, be careful. The city can be dangerous at night. My parents are out there going hungry, going cold. Danger is the last thing I'm worried about right now. Sarah left Mrs. Dorothy's house with a singular purpose in mind: find her parents. It was already late in the afternoon. The sun began to set, painting the sky oranges and reds. But she wasn't going to wait. She wasn't going to waste another minute. She started walking toward downtown. Her feet carried her automatically toward the bus station, toward the alley Mrs. Dorothy had mentioned. Her heart beat with a mix of hope and fear. What if she found them? And what if she didn't find them? She didn't know which would be worse. The alley was exactly where Mrs. Dorothy had said. It was narrow and dark, even with the daylight that still remained. On both sides were large dumpsters, the kind restaurants and businesses use. The smell was overwhelming, a mix of rotting food, waste, and dampness. The ground was wet and slippery, covered in liquids. Sarah preferred not to identify. Sarah began walking down the alley slowly, looking behind every dumpster, inspecting every dark corner. "Mom?" she called softly. "Dad?" "It's me, Sarah. I've come home." There was no answer, only the distant sound of traffic and the constant dripping of water from some broken pipe. Sarah spent the next hour searching that alley and other similar ones around the station. She found several homeless people, some sleeping in cardboard boxes, others sitting with blank stares. To each one, she asked if they had seen an older couple, describing her parents in as much detail as possible. Some ignored her. Others asked for money. A few really tried to help, but none remembered seeing anyone matching the description. When it got completely dark, Sarah expanded her search. She went to the municipal market, that bustling place where her mother bought fresh vegetables every week. The vendors were closing their stalls, putting away their goods. Sarah approached several of them, asking, describing, begging for information. "Ma'am, have you seen this couple?" she asked over and over, showing them an old photograph she kept in her wallet from happier times, when her parents smiled in front of the camera during a past Christmas. Most shook their heads. Some looked at her with compassion, others with indifference. A fruit seller, a middle-aged woman with a stained apron, stopped her. Wait, she said, looking at the photograph closer. "I think I've seen this lady. She comes sometimes when I'm closing, asks me if I have fruits or vegetables I'm not going to sell anymore. Sometimes I give her some things that are a little bruised, but still good." Sarah's heart jumped. "When was the last time you saw her?" Let me think. Maybe 3 or 4 days ago." "Yes, it was last Friday. She came with an older gentleman, her husband, I think. Both of them looked, well, not in very good condition. I gave them some apples, some bananas that were very ripe, some tomatoes. The lady thanked me as if I had given her gold. It broke my heart. Do you know where they went after?" The vendor shook her head. "No, I'm sorry. But sometimes I see people who live on the street gathering near the old bridge, the one by the Detroit River. They say there's less trouble with the police there." Thank you, said Sarah, almost running toward the direction the vendor had pointed. The old bridge was about 20 minutes walking. It was a concrete structure that had been replaced by a new bridge years ago, but had never been demolished. Now it served primarily as a shelter for homeless people, a fact Sarah knew, but had never thought much about until now. When she reached the bridge, she saw a group of people gathered around a metal barrel where they had lit a fire. The flames illuminated worn, tired faces of people life had hit hard. There were men, women, some even with small children. Everyone turned to look at Sarah when she approached, their gazes cautious. "Excuse me," said Sarah, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm looking for my parents. Their names are Robert and Margaret. They are 73 and 71 years old, respectively. Has anyone seen them?" An older man with a long gray beard spoke. "We don't give information about people here, miss. Most of us are here because we want to be left alone." "Please," begged Sarah, her voice cracking. "They are my parents. They don't deserve to be on the street. I was out of the country working. I didn't know they were in this situation. Please, if you have seen them, tell me. I just want to take them home. Take care of them." A younger woman, probably Sarah's age, approached. Her face was dirty, but her eyes were kind. "Describe them better." "There are many older people around here." Sarah described her parents with as much detail as she could. The way her father limped slightly on his right leg from an old injury, how her mother always braided her hair even when she didn't have much left, the way her father used to hum old songs when he was nervous. The woman nodded slowly. I think I've seen them, but not here. I heard there is a couple that sometimes sleeps behind the old post office. It's quieter there, fewer people. Where is that? The woman gave her directions. Sarah thanked them and began to walk away. But the man with the beard called out to her. Hey, miss. If they are your real parents, if you really love them, hurry. The nights are starting to get colder. Old folks don't last long on the street. The words were like a dagger, but Sarah knew they were true. She nodded and began to run. The abandoned post office was in the old part of the city, an area that had fallen into decline years ago. It had been a beautiful building once, with elegant columns and large windows. But now it was in ruins with broken windows and walls covered in graffiti. Sarah circled the building until she reached the back. It was almost midnight now, and the only lights came from distant street lamps and the moon shining weakly through the clouds. At first she saw nothing, only shadows and piled trash. But then, in a protected corner, where the old roof still offered some cover, she saw movement. Sarah approached slowly, her heart beating so hard she thought she was going to faint. And then she saw them. They were two figures huddled together, covered with layers of cardboard and old cloth. Even from a distance, even in the dark, Sarah recognized them. This is the image that no child ever wants to see: the people who raised you, reduced to shadows in the dark. It's a moment of absolute heartbreak. But watch closely, because Sarah's reaction here is what defines true strength. The way her mother huddled against her father seeking warmth. The way her father surrounded her protectively with his arm, even in sleep. Mom, whispered Sarah, her voice broken. Dad. The figures didn't move. Sarah took a few steps closer, and then she could really see them. Her mother, Mrs. Margaret, had gray and dirty hair, spread over a piece of cardboard that served as a pillow. Her face, which Sarah remembered full and cheerful, was gaunt. The cheekbones stuck out too much, cheeks sunken, even asleep. Her expression was one of pain. Her father, Mr. Robert, looked even worse. He had always been a robust man, with a happy man's belly, as he himself used to joke. But now he seemed to have shrunk as if life itself had been sucked out of him. His hands, which Sarah remembered strong and capable, were bony and trembling even in sleep. Both wore clothes that clearly weren't theirs, donations or dumpster finds, garments too big or too small with stains and tears. Her father's shoes were tied with strings because they had no laces. Her mother had no shoes at all, only broken plastic sandals that revealed her swollen and dirty feet. Sarah knelt in front of them, tears falling so fast she couldn't see them clearly. She reached out a trembling hand and gently touched her mother's shoulder. Mom, she said again, her voice barely a whisper. It's me. It's Sarah. Her mother woke up with a start, eyes wide, full of fear. For a moment she didn't recognize Sarah in the dark. She began to recoil, frightened, waking her husband in the process. No, don't be afraid, said Sarah quickly, turning on her phone's flashlight and pointing it at her own face so they could see her clearly. It's me, Mom. It's Sarah, your daughter. I've come back, Mrs. Margaret's eyes focused on Sarah's face. For a long, agonizing moment, there was no recognition. But then something changed. Her mother's eyes filled with tears and her mouth opened in a silent scream. Sarah, she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. My Sarah. Yes, Mom, it's me. I'm back. I came back for you. Mr. Robert was also awake now, looking at Sarah as if she were a ghost, as if he couldn't believe what his eyes were telling him. My girl, he murmured, his voice shaking. My little girl. Sarah threw herself at them, hugging them with such force that the three almost fell. She could feel their bones through the too thin clothing. She could smell the sour smell of days without bathing. But none of that mattered. Nothing mattered except that she had found them, that they were alive, that she was with them. I'm sorry, sobbed Sarah against her mother's shoulder. I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have protected you. No, no, my girl, cried her mother, stroking her hair with trembling hands. You are not to blame. You don't know anything. I know everything, said Sarah, separating slightly so she could look both in the eyes. Mrs. Dorothy told me. Jason lied to me, and I looked for you. I've been looking for you all afternoon and all night. You shouldn't have looked for us, said her father, his voice full of shame. He looked away, unable to hold his daughter's gaze. You shouldn't see us like this. We are a disgrace. No, said Sarah fiercely, taking her father's face between her hands and forcing him to look at her. "You will never be a disgrace to me. Never. The disgrace belongs to Jason, to what he did to you. But I am here now, and I am going to fix this. I am going to take care of you like you took care of me all my life." "But Sarah," began her mother, "your life in Canada, your job." "There is nothing in Canada more important than you," interrupted Sarah. "Nothing. Now listen to me carefully. We are getting out of here. I am going to take you to a hotel where you can bathe, eat something hot, sleep in a real bed, and tomorrow we are going to go to the hospital to get you checked, and then we are going to find a place for us, a real home." "We have no money," said her father with a broken voice. "We were robbed of everything we had. We don't even have ID." "I have money," assured Sarah, "and we will get new documents. Everything can be fixed. The only thing that can't be fixed is lost time, and I'm not going to waste another minute." She helped her parents get up. It was painful to see how difficult it was for them simply to stand, how their knees cracked, how their backs were so hunched from sleeping on the hard ground. Her mother could barely walk in those broken sandals. "Wait here a moment," said Sarah. She ran to the main street and flagged down a taxi. "Please," she told the driver, handing him a $20 bill immediately. "Pull into the alley. My parents are there, and they can barely walk." The driver looked surprised but nodded, driving slowly down the narrow path to where the couple huddled. The driver saw the older couple, dirty and clearly homeless, and frowned. "Hey, miss, I don't know if they are my parents," said Sarah firmly, taking a $100 bill out of her wallet. "I'm taking them to the best hotel in the city. This bill is yours if you take us without asking questions." The driver looked at the bill, then at Sarah, then at the older couple clinging to each other. Something in his expression softened. "Keep your money, miss. I'll take you. Get in." Sarah helped her parents get into the taxi. She sat between them, wrapping her arms around them. Her mother kept touching her face as if she needed physical confirmation that Sarah was real. "I can't believe you're here," Mrs. Margaret kept repeating. "I thought we would never see you again." "I was always going to come back," said Sarah, kissing her mother's forehead. "Always." The trip to the hotel was silent, except for occasional sobs. The driver watched them in the rearview mirror, and Sarah could see tears in his eyes too. When they arrived at the hotel, one of the nicest in Detroit, the concierge looked at them with clear disapproval. Sarah approached the counter with her credit card in hand and an expression that admitted no argument. "I need your best suite," she said firmly, "with a full bath, room service available all night, and I need you to get me clean clothes immediately. A small size for an older lady, a medium size for an older gentleman, underwear, pajamas, robes, slippers, everything. I also need hygiene products, shampoo, conditioner, soap, skin cream, toothbrushes, all the basics." The concierge blinked, clearly surprised by the transformation from a young woman with homeless people to a client who clearly had money to spend. "Of course, miss, but I will need your identification. Here is my passport," said Sarah, putting it on the counter along with her credit card. "Charge everything to this card and please hurry with the clothes and products. It is urgent." While the concierge processed the reservation, Sarah turned to her parents, who were waiting nearby, looking small and lost in the luxurious hotel lobby. She approached them and took their hands. "Everything is fine," she assured them. "In a few minutes we will be in a beautiful room. You'll be able to bathe with hot water all you want. I'll bring you hot food, whatever you want to eat, and you will sleep in soft beds with clean sheets." Her father began to cry openly. "We don't deserve this," he sobbed. "Not after what you've seen us become, digging in the trash like animals." "Dad, listen to me," said Sarah, taking his face between her hands, exactly as he used to do with her when she was a child and needed her to understand something important. "You are not what happened to you. You are the strongest, bravest, most loving people I know. You survived something most people couldn't survive, and now you are going to heal, and I am going to be here every step of the way." The concierge brought them the keys. "Suite 412. The bellboy will accompany you. The clothes and products will arrive in 15 minutes. The suite was beautiful. It had a spacious living room, 2 bedrooms with king-size beds, 2 full bathrooms, and a panoramic view of the illuminated city. But what mattered most was that it was warm, clean, and safe. Sarah guided her parents to the master bathroom. It was huge, with a deep tub and a separate shower with multiple heads. "Mom, I'm going to help you bathe first. Dad can bathe in the other bathroom." Her mother nodded, too tired and overwhelmed to protest. Sarah turned on the taps of the tub, adjusting the temperature until it was perfectly warm. She added bath salts and liquid soap she found in the bathroom, creating a soft and aromatic foam. With infinite patience and tenderness, she helped her mother remove layers of dirty clothes. What she saw made her cry in silence. Her mother, who used to be a woman of robust build, was now skin and bones. Her ribs showed clearly. She had bruises on her arms and legs, some old and yellow, others more recent and dark. Her feet were swollen and covered in sores. "Oh, Mom," whispered Sarah, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Don't cry, my girl," said her mother softly. "It's over." It's over, but it wasn't over, was it? This pain, this suffering, would leave scars that might never heal completely. Sarah helped her mother get into the tub. Mrs. Margaret moaned at contact with the warm water, not from pain, but from relief. She closed her eyes and tears began to slide down her cheeks. "I don't remember the last time I bathed with hot water," she murmured. "In the public bathrooms at the park, when I could get in, the water was always cold, and many times there was no soap." Sarah took the sponge, but her hand trembled as she touched her mother's back. The spine protruded sharply, a ridge of bone under paper-thin skin that spoke of months of starvation. The water turned dark, gray with the grime of the alleyways, but it was the emotional filth that was harder to wash away. Sarah drained the tub and filled it again, the silence in the room heavy with unsaid things. Stripping away the filth of the alley reveals the physical toll, but the emotional scars run much deeper than bruises. As Sarah washes away the grime, she's beginning a long journey of restoring their dignity, a process that is both tender and incredibly difficult to witness. As she gently poured warm water over her mother's matted hair, Mrs. Margaret didn't just cry. She let out a sound, a low, guttural whimper of a woman who had lost her sense of self. "I didn't want you to see me," her mother whispered, refusing to open her eyes. "We became ghosts, Sarah. That's what hurts the most. Not the cold, not the hunger, but the way people looked through us. We were your parents. We were people who had built a life, and in a few months, we became nothing but trash on the sidewalk. I felt I had failed you by letting myself fall so low." Sarah's heart shattered. "Tell me," she whispered, needing to share the burden. "Tell me how it started." And so, the confession began. Not as a list of events, but as a recounting of broken trust. Mrs. Margaret spoke of the day Jason stopped calling them Mom and Dad and started calling them burdens. She spoke of the silence in the house, how the air turned toxic long before they were kicked out, how the fear of their own son paralyzed them more than any physical threat could. She told her about the ever-increasing restrictions, about how they took away food, about how Tiffany insulted them, and Jason did nothing to defend them. "I tried to call you so many times," cried Mrs. Margaret, "but Jason took away my phone. He told me he needed to sell it to pay bills. He gave me a basic one but controlled every call. Every time I tried to dial you, he told me there was no credit, to wait." "And the money I sent?" asked Sarah, though she already knew the answer. "We never saw it, my child. Jason told us he was saving it for us, for when we needed it. But when we finally needed it, when he kicked us out, he didn't give us anything. Just $50 and 2 suitcases with some old clothes. And what happened after? How did you end up on the street?" Her mother told her about the robbery, how a group of youths had snatched their suitcases in the park, leaving them with only the clothes they were wearing. She told her about the failed attempts to find shelter in shelters that were full, about nights sleeping on park benches until the police kicked them out. "We tried to work," said Mrs. Margaret with a broken voice. "Your father offered to repair watches, clean anything, but no one wants to hire old people without ID, without an address. So we learned to survive another way. Digging in the trash," said Sarah, her voice barely audible. "At first we died of shame," admitted her mother. "We waited until dawn when no one was looking. But hunger makes you overcome shame. We learned that behind the restaurants, right before dawn, they sometimes threw out food that was still good. Yesterday's bread, bruised fruit, food that was left over but they couldn't serve anymore." While her mother spoke, Sarah finished bathing her and helped her out of the tub. She wrapped her in a soft, fluffy towel, drying her with care, especially around the sores on her feet. There was a knock at the door. It was room service with the clothes Sarah had ordered. They handed them to her in elegant bags. Sarah helped her mother put on clean underwear, a soft cotton nightgown, and a cozy robe. She put lotion on her hands and feet, brushed her wet hair, and braided it gently. When she finished, she took her mother to one of the bedrooms and helped her into bed. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, soft as silk. Her mother sank into the mattress with a sigh that seemed to come from the deepest part of her being. "It's like being in heaven," she murmured, her eyes already closing from exhaustion. "How long has it been since I felt warmth like this?" After all those nights curled up on the concrete, I truly believed the cold had settled into my marrow forever, that it had become part of my soul. But lying here, on these soft sheets, I can finally let myself believe that I'm still alive, that I am still a human being worthy of love. "Rest, Mom. I'm going to help Dad now, and then I'm going to bring you food." Sarah went to the other bathroom, where her father had been trying to bathe himself. She found him sitting on the edge of the tub with his clothes still on, crying silently. "Dad," she said softly, kneeling in front of him. "What's wrong?" "I can't," sobbed her father. "I can't take off my clothes in front of you, my little girl. It's too humiliating. Look at me. I'm a skeleton. I'm a failure." "Dad, look at me," ordered Sarah firmly. When he looked up, she continued. "You are not a failure. You are my hero. You always have been. You survived something unimaginable. You protected Mom, and now I am going to protect you. There is no shame in needing help. There is no shame in being vulnerable. Let me take care of you like you took care of me all my life." With her father's help, who kept sobbing, Sarah helped him undress. His condition was as bad as her mother's, maybe worse. She could count every one of his ribs, every vertebra in his spine. He had an infected wound on his leg that clearly needed medical attention. She helped him get into the shower, adjusting the temperature perfectly. She washed him carefully, avoiding the most sensitive areas, speaking softly to him the whole time about Canada, about her job, about how beautiful it was to see Niagara Falls frozen in winter. "Someday I'm going to take you to see Canada," she promised while rinsing his hair. "We are going to see the falls together. We are going to see the leaves change color in autumn. We are going to do everything we couldn't do during these 5 years." When her father was clean and dressed in new, comfortable clothes, Sarah took him to the room next to her mother's. She helped him into bed and tucked him in as he used to do with her when she was little. "My girl," said her father, grabbing her hand tightly. "You should never have seen us like this. You should never have known we fell so low." "You didn't fall," said Sarah firmly. "You were pushed. There is a difference. And now I am going to lift you up. I'm going to help you heal, and afterwards we are going to be a family again." She called room service and ordered homemade chicken noodle soup, the mildest they had, with white bread and chamomile tea. When the food arrived, she helped her parents sit up in bed and served them small portions. She knew they couldn't eat much at once after so long with empty stomachs. She watched them eat with a mix of joy and sadness. The way they savored every spoonful, as if it were the most exquisite delicacy in the world, broke her heart. This was the level to which they had been reduced, grateful for a simple hot soup. After eating, both were exhausted. Sarah tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and promised to be right in the room next door if they needed her. But before she could leave, her mother stopped her. "Sarah, my child, there is something else you need to know." "What is it, Mom?" "Your brother," began Mrs. Margaret, tears starting to fall again. "Before he kicked us out, I told him that if he did this, if he abandoned us like this, I could never forgive him. And he looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. It was like he was a stranger. And he told me, 'I don't care about your forgiveness. I don't need you anymore. I have a new life now.'" Sarah felt a rage so intense she had to restrain herself from screaming. "Don't worry about Jason now," she said with a controlled voice. "I'll deal with him. The important thing now is that you recover." When her parents finally fell asleep, Sarah sat in the living room of the suite. It was almost 3 inches the morning. She was physically exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop spinning. She took her phone and sent a text to Jason. "I found them. I know everything. Do not try to contact me or our parents ever again. I will be speaking with a lawyer." Then she called her supervisor in Canada. It was early morning there, but this couldn't wait. "Sarah?" answered her supervisor, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No, David. Nothing is okay. I need to take indefinite leave. It's a family emergency." She briefly explained the situation. David, who had elderly parents himself, understood immediately. "Take all the time you need. Your position will be waiting for you when you are ready to come back. And if you need anything, resources, contacts here that can help, whatever, just tell me." "Thank you, David. That means a lot." Afterwards, she spent the next few hours researching on her phone. She looked for the best geriatric doctors in the city, lawyers specializing in family law, social workers, any resource that could help her parents. She made lists, took notes, planned every step. At dawn, exhaustion finally overcame her. She fell asleep on the suite's sofa, her phone still in her hand, surrounded by notes and plans to rebuild her parents' life. She woke up a few hours later to the sound of movement in one of the rooms. She got up quickly and found her mother awake, sitting on the bed, looking out the window with an expression of wonder. "Mom, how do you feel?" "As if it had been a dream," said her mother softly. "I had to touch the sheets, feel how soft they are to convince myself it was real." Sarah sat next to her and hugged her. "It is real, Mom. All this is real, and it's only going to get better from now on." She ordered a hearty breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, yogurt, freshly squeezed orange juice, coffee. When her father woke up, the three ate breakfast together at the small table in the suite. It was the first family meal they had had in years. And although there was pain in every conversation, there was also love. There was hope. After breakfast, Sarah made several calls. First, she contacted a geriatric doctor who agreed to see them that same afternoon. Then she called a lawyer to discuss legal options regarding the house and the stolen money. "I want to sue my brother," she told the lawyer over the phone. "I want to recover the house that was my parents'. I want him to pay for what he did." "I understand your frustration," replied the lawyer calmly, "but I need to warn you that these cases can be complicated. If the house is legally in your brother's name, it can be difficult to recover, but we can explore options." "Explore everything," said Sarah with determination. "I don't care how much it costs or how long it takes. I want justice." That afternoon, she took her parents to the doctor's office. The doctor was an older man of about 60, with a kind and patient manner, who immediately made her parents more comfortable. The exam was exhaustive and heartbreaking. The doctor found severe malnutrition, chronic dehydration, anemia, pressure ulcers, skin infections, early pneumonia in her father, severely aggravated arthritis in both, severe dental problems due to lack of hygiene, and a long list of other ailments. "They are going to need extensive treatment," the doctor told Sarah in private after the exam, "both physical and psychological. What they have lived through is trauma, severe trauma. Not only the body needs to heal, but also the mind and spirit." "Whatever is necessary," said Sarah. "Money is no problem. I just want them to recover." The doctor nodded. "I'm going to prescribe various medications and supplements. I also strongly recommend psychological therapy for both, and nutritionally, they need a very specific diet to regain weight healthily." Sarah took all the prescriptions and recommendations, noting every detail. She left her parents resting in the waiting area while she ran to the pharmacy next door to buy every medication and supplement. Afterward, she took them straight back to the hotel to rest. She ordered comfortable clothes, appropriate shoes, and warm coats from a department store to be delivered directly to their suite. Her parents protested when the packages arrived, overwhelmed by the generosity. "It's too much," said her mother. "You've already spent so much." "It's never too much when it comes to you," answered Sarah every time. "You spent your whole life taking care of me. Now it's my turn." After several days at the hotel, Sarah found a perfect apartment. It was 2 bedrooms, in a nice building, in a quiet neighborhood. It had lots of natural light, a large kitchen where her mother could cook again, and it was close to parks and stores. She rented it immediately and began furnishing it. She didn't buy expensive or extravagant things, but comfortable, practical things that would make her parents feel at home. Soft curtains in colors her mother liked, a comfortable recliner for her father, family photographs she had recovered from friends and neighbors. The day she took her parents to the apartment, both cried. "It's perfect," her mother said over and over, touching everything as if she couldn't believe it was real. It's more than we dreamed. You deserve it, said Sarah simply. You deserve this and much more. Healing was not a straight line. It was a mountain climb in the dark. In the beginning, the shadows were long. For weeks, her father would hoard bread rolls from dinner in his pockets, a reflex from the days he didn't know when he would eat again. Her mother would flinch whenever a door slammed too hard, her eyes darting to the entrance as if expecting Jason to storm in and throw them out. Sarah learned that you cannot rush the mending of a broken spirit. She established a routine, not just of medicine, but of dignity. Every morning, she didn't just give them pills. She sat with them, held their hands, and listened to the same stories of the alleyway until the horror of those memories began to lose its sharp edge. Slowly, the fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet, steely resilience. One rainy afternoon, looking out the window of their new apartment, her father didn't shrink away from the cold glass. Instead, he stood tall. "We survived the storm, Margaret," he said, taking his wife's hand. "We are still here." It was in that moment Sarah knew they weren't just survivors. They were warriors who had walked through hell and kept their capacity to love intact. Her father began to walk straighter, with more confidence. Both began to smile more, to make small jokes, to remember who they were before everything collapsed. But the road to recovery wasn't linear. There were nights her mother woke up screaming, reliving the trauma of being on the street. There were days her father couldn't get out of bed, overwhelmed by depression. There were moments when both cried for hours, releasing years of accumulated pain. In those moments, Sarah was there, holding their hands, listening to their stories, assuring them they were safe now, that they would never be alone again. The therapist Sarah had found, Dr. Jessica, was a specialist in trauma and the elderly. In one of their joint sessions, she explained to Sarah, "What your parents lived through is not something that is overcome in weeks or even months. Abandonment by a child, loss of dignity, the struggle to survive on the street. These are deep traumas. Healing will take time." "I have all the time in the world," replied Sarah. "I'm not going anywhere." 3 months after finding her parents, Sarah received a call from the lawyer. "I have news," he said. "It's not completely good, but there is some progress. I managed to trace some of the money transfers you sent. We have evidence that your brother received the money, but didn't use it for your parents' care as intended. That's enough to sue. It's a start, but there is more. I spoke with several neighbors who are willing to testify about the abuse and abandonment. I also found that your brother sold several pieces of furniture and objects that technically belonged to your parents, not him. And the house?" The lawyer sighed. "The house is complicated. It is legally in your brother's name from years ago. But there is a legal argument that the transfer was made under the premise that he would care for his parents. His breach of that tacit agreement could be grounds for a case." "Do what you have to do," said Sarah. "I want him to face the consequences of what he did." "I understand. But miss, I need to ask you, are you sure you want to proceed? Family cases can be long, painful, and public. Are your parents ready for that?" Sarah reflected. That night she spoke with her parents about the lawsuit. "I don't know," said her mother wearily. "He's my son, Sarah. Despite everything, he's my son." "A son who abandoned you," replied Sarah harshly. "A son who left you to starve." "I know," said her mother, tears rolling down. "And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him. But do I really want to spend what's left of my life in courts fighting? I've suffered enough, my child." "But Mom, he has to pay." "He's already paying," interrupted her father gently. "Believe me, Sarah, he's paying. Maybe not now, maybe not visibly, but the guilt, the shame of what he did, that will haunt him the rest of his life." "How can you be so compassionate after everything?" asked Sarah, frustrated. "It's not compassion," said her mother. "It's survival. We already lost so much, my girl. I don't want to lose more time, more energy, more peace on revenge. What he did was unforgivable. Yes, but if I continue focusing on that, he will continue controlling my life, and I'm not going to give him that power." Sarah understood, though she didn't like it. She called the lawyer the next day. "Stop the lawsuit, but I want to document everything that happened just in case they change their mind someday. Understood? I'll prepare a complete file with all the evidence we've collected." As the months passed, life found a new normal. Sarah continued working as a freelance translator from home, which allowed her to be close to her parents. Her mother resumed her passion for sewing and began making quilts to donate to a local shelter. Her father, with his diabetes now controlled and his health improved, began offering free watch repair classes at a community center. "I want to teach young people a trade that is dying," he explained, "and I want to feel useful again." Sarah saw them bloom again and her heart filled with joy. But there was also a lingering sadness. Sometimes, when her mother thought no one was watching, she looked out the window with a distant expression. Sarah knew she was thinking about Jason, wondering how her son could have transformed into someone so cruel. 1 year after finding her parents, Sarah was at the market buying vegetables when she heard a familiar voice. Sarah turned and saw Tiffany. She looked different, thinner, with less elegant clothes than before. Without the excessive makeup, she looked younger, but also more tired. "Tiffany," said Sarah coldly. I need to talk to you," said Tiffany, her voice wavering. "Please, I have nothing to say to you. I know you don't, but please, just 5 minutes." Sarah looked at the woman who had helped destroy her family. Part of her wanted to simply walk away, but another part, the part that had been trained as a nurse to see beyond anger, saw something in Tiffany's eyes. Regret, maybe, or at least something that looked like it. 5 minutes, said Sarah, but here in public. They sat on a bench near the market. Tiffany wrung her hands nervously. "Jason and I broke up," she began. "About 3 months ago. Things got very bad after you left." "I don't care," said Sarah coldly. "I know. I didn't expect you to care either, but there is something you need to know, something I need to say, even if it's just for my own conscience." Sarah waited without saying anything. I instigated a lot of what happened," admitted Tiffany, tears beginning to fall. "I was the one who convinced Jason that his parents were a burden. I was the one who suggested we kick them out. I was the one who spent the money you sent on frivolous things. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. And do you think an apology is going to fix anything?" "No," said Tiffany, shaking her head. "I know there is nothing that can fix what I did, but I needed you to know that after you left, after seeing how you desperately searched for your parents, something broke in me. I began to see what I had really done." "A little late for that revelation," snapped Sarah. "I know. Believe me, I know. I broke up with Jason when I realized that not only had I destroyed his relationship with his parents, but that I myself had become a monster. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I was so cruel. I'm not interested in your journey of self-discovery. I didn't expect you to be interested either." Tiffany wiped her tears. Just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I know it's insufficient. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry more than words can express." Sarah stared at her. Part of her wanted to scream at her, tell her all the damage she had caused. But another part, the part that had learned from her parents about forgiveness and letting go, was simply tired. "I don't forgive you," she said finally. "And I probably never will. But I appreciate that you had the courage to tell me this. Now, please, don't approach me or my parents ever again." Tiffany nodded, standing up. "I understand. Just tell your parents, if someday you can, that I'm sorry. I don't expect their forgiveness either, but I wanted them to know." Sarah didn't answer. She simply got up and walked away, leaving Tiffany alone on the bench. Walking away from that bench was the hardest thing Sarah had ever done, yet it felt like the final chain had been broken. She realized then that hate is a heavy stone to carry, one that only weighs down the person holding it. By refusing to scream, by refusing to engage with Tiffany's drama, Sarah wasn't showing weakness. She was reclaiming the peace that had been stolen from her family. She was choosing to fill her life with the love of her parents rather than the bitterness of her enemies. That night, while having dinner with her parents, Sarah told them about the encounter. Her mother listened in silence, her hands motionless on the plate. "What do you feel?" asked Sarah finally. "I don't know," admitted her mother. "Part of me feels, I don't know if it's relief exactly. Maybe it's simply recognition. Recognition that people can change, can regret. Would you forgive her?" "I don't know," repeated her mother. "Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. Maybe someday, or maybe not. But at least knowing she recognizes what she did, that is something." Time continued to pass. 2 years after having found her parents, Sarah took them on a trip. They had dreamed of seeing the coast, seeing the ocean, so she rented a small house near the beach in Florida for a week. Seeing her parents walk on the sand with the waves lapping their feet, laughing like children, was one of the most beautiful moments of Sarah's life. Her mother collected seashells while her father told her stories of when he was young and worked near the harbor. One night, while they were sitting on the terrace watching the sunset, her father spoke. "Sarah, my girl, I need to tell you something." "What is it, Dad?" "Thank you," he said simply, his voice charged with emotion. "Thank you for not abandoning us. Thank you for looking for us. Thank you for saving us." "Dad, you don't have to thank me." "Yes, we do," interrupted her mother, taking Sarah's hand. "You saved our lives, Sarah. Not only physically, but in every sense. You gave us back our dignity, our humanity. You showed us that we still had value, that we were still loved." The three cried together while the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky reds and oranges and purples. Sarah never returned to Toronto permanently. She decided her place was here with her parents, helping them live the years they had left with the dignity and love they always deserved. She established her own translation company, working with clients from all over the world, from her home office. She earned well, enough for the three to live comfortably. As for Jason, Sarah saw him once more. 3 years after finding her parents, it was by accident in a supermarket. He looked gaunt, older than someone his age should look. When their eyes met, Jason opened his mouth as if he were going to say something, but Sarah simply turned around and walked away. She had nothing to say to him. He had made his choice and now lived with the consequences. Her parents lived 7 more years after Sarah found them. 7 years full of love, laughter, small adventures, and a lot of healing. When her father passed away peacefully in his sleep at 80 years old, it was in his own bed, surrounded by love with his wife and daughter holding his hands. "Thank you for giving me these years," he whispered to Sarah right before closing his eyes for the last time. "Thank you for showing me that true love never abandons." Her mother lived 2 more years. On her last day, with Sarah sitting by her bed, she said, "My girl, I want you to know something. I have forgiven your brother." "What?" Sarah was surprised. "Not for him," clarified her mother. "For me. I carried that pain for so long, but now at the end, I realized that forgiving doesn't mean saying what he did was okay. It means simply letting go of the weight, stopping allowing his betrayal to define my last thoughts. Holding on to hate is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die, my dear. I choose to forgive him, not to set him free, but to set myself free. It takes a profound level of grace to forgive the unforgivable, not for the offender's sake, but for your own salvation." As we reach the end of Sarah's journey, this might be the most important lesson of all, that letting go is the final act of survival. I want to leave this world with a light heart, carrying only the love I have for you and your father, not the heavy burden of resentment for a son who lost his way. "I love you, Mom," said Sarah, crying. "And I love you, my girl, my saving angel. Now promise me something, whatever it is. Promise that you will live a full life, that you will find love, that you will have your own family if you wish, that you won't waste your life regretting the time that passed. Promise me you will be happy. I promise you, Mom." Her mother smiled, closed her eyes, and left in peace. Sarah mourned her loss, but also celebrated her life. She celebrated the fact that her parents didn't die alone in a cold alley, but surrounded by love in a warm home. Years later, Sarah married a good man named Michael, a teacher she had met at the community center where her father used to teach. They had 2 children to whom they told stories about their grandparents, about their strength, about the unshakable love that kept them alive, even in the darkest moments. Now, decades have passed. The alleyway is gone, replaced by new buildings, but the lesson remains etched in Sarah's soul. She often passes by that spot, not with pain, but with a profound sense of gratitude. She realizes now that life is not defined by the tragedies that befall us, but by the grace with which we rise from them. Her parents taught her the greatest lesson of all, that dignity is not found in a house or a bank account, but in the unshakable human spirit. They showed her that even when stripped of everything, love remains the one thing that cannot be taken away. If you are listening to this and feeling lost, or if you are carrying the weight of a painful past, remember Sarah's journey. Remember that no winter lasts forever, and no night is dark enough to put out the light of a family's love. You have the strength to rewrite your ending. From the stench of a trash-filled alley to holding hands on a deathbed, Sarah's family journey has proven one undeniable truth. Money lost can always be earned back, but conscience and family, once lost, can never be bought. Sarah's mother chose forgiveness in her final moments not because her ungrateful son deserved it, but because she deserved to depart in peace. That is the highest form of a mother's love. If this story has touched your heart, please pick up the phone and call your parents today, while you still can. Leave a comment saying, "Thank you, Mom and Dad," to help us spread this message of love. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Please click on the video appearing on your screen now to continue exploring other moving stories about life. Goodbye.